Great. Well, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us tonight. A lot of time gets spent discussing investment roles in asset management. However, there are actually a lot more roles out there supporting the business and also supporting the investment professionals that are equally as important and just as interesting. We hope that tonight we can showcase some of those other areas where you can have a very successful and interesting career. If any of you do have any questions, you can please send them through the chat and we'll do our best to respond to those at the end. So just as a quick intro, I'm Jamie Shearer and I run Mondrian Investment Partners Finance and HR teams. I'm responsible for dealing with budgeting, financial statements, tax, cash management, and all the relevant reporting that goes along with that to the COO and the board. From an HR perspective, I guess the most important thing that I do is I ensure people get paid. Most people are much concerned about that. But we're also responsible for training and development, diversity and inclusion, benefits, and general HR advice to staff and to management. And this is my lovely panel today. We've got Victoria, Elizabeth, and Maria. And I'm going to pass on to them to give themselves a little introduction. Victoria, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jamie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Victoria Clark. I'm the head of HR at Triple Point Investment Management. I've been here for the last 6 years. And at a high level, I'm responsible for the people strategy at Triple Point, which is a broad sense similar to some of Jamie's responsibilities. Is about how we attract and retain our people, how we develop them during their time at Triple Point, and how we make the most of our people to succeed as a business.
Great. Thanks, Victoria. Maria?
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Isasa, and I head up investment operations at Man Group. I've been at Man Group for about 18 months, and before that, I was at Goldman Sachs. My last role was global head of equity derivative drafting, but I did a number of different roles. I spent just over 17 years there, so a number of different roles on the buy and sell side. And I guess in terms of investment operations and what that actually means, operations generally, I like to think of as kind of the engine room of a steamship. And it's kind of where all of the, kind of things need to continue working in order for the ship to continue moving to the destination that it needs to get to. And obviously, if things go wrong in the engine room, typically there's trouble in lots of different places. So ops is a central part to kind of the whole investment management, I guess, firm that I work for.
That's a great description, Maria. I like that. Great. And Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Martin, Head of Risk at Close Brothers Asset Management. I like your analogy there, Maria, so I'm going to continue that one. I work in risk, and I think if Maria is the sort of steam room, I'm probably the brakes, and not to mean that in a bad way. I think if we imagine when cars first started, they didn't have brakes, they couldn't go very fast. So I like to think the risk is the function that can help the business really grow, but at the same time being that kind of brake to make sure that they can slow down when they need to. So whether that's through the regulator, whether that's because ultimately something's gone wrong. And so that's my role at Close Brothers.
That's excellent. I'm going to steal that one, Elizabeth. That's great. Perfect. So I think it would be great for all of us to explain how we got to where we are. What paths did you take, both educationally and career-wise? Maria, do you want to start us off there?
Yep, sure. So educational, I think I was a bit quote unquote boring because I came up the usual way. I did business administration and then started. But I suppose the reason why I got into business administration was something that I wanted to share with you all. Growing up, I was very close to my maternal grandparents, and my grandfather had his own business back home. I'm from Bolivia, and he had an import-export business. And when I was around 15, 16, he asked if I wanted to come and work with him over the summer. Now, work with him over the summer really meant kind of learning how to draft, business emails. And well, at the time it was letters. We didn't have email still. I'm not going to try and date myself with that, but we did send a few faxes, a few telexes still back then from Bolivia, but also doing a lot of the kind of inventory and the, just learning like literally top to bottom kind of what the business was and what it meant. And that really got me interested in business administration, which is why I went into that. And then I was lucky enough to be able to go to uni in the US, which is how I ended up as a grad at Goldman Sachs. And then kind of my career went on from there.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Maria. And Elizabeth?
So I think I probably didn't take a necessarily standard route, or at least it wasn't when I did it, but I started my career as an apprentice. So That was with Fidelity. They had a 2-year sort of administration type apprenticeship. So that was where I started, and then sort of got to know working in an operations team. I then moved across to a different firm, Barclays, where I was for quite a long period of time, but working in various operational roles, and then moved across into risk, and I've been in risk ever since. So must be something all right with it. But I think from an educational perspective, alongside doing that, obviously, because I didn't have a formal qualification or degree at the time, lots of professional qualifications. So the investment management certificate, and working with the CISI, who are the Chartered Institute of Securities Investment, and did various sort of diplomas through them. And then I guess more recently, I kind of thought I'd quite like some tertiary education. So I've done a postgraduate diploma, and I'm just doing a master's in financial crime and compliance and digital society. So lots of different things that I've done there with professional qualifications that probably some people have done with sort of standard education. So but enjoyed that journey.
It's great. Yeah, there's lots of different ways to get to where you get. So that's great. Thank you. And Victoria.
So I came up through the university route. I did a business and management degree, which gave me the opportunity to spend a year in industry. I specifically chose a degree with that as an option, because I knew I was quite keen. I wanted to get working, but I also wanted to do some sort of postgraduate, not postgraduate, but some studying post school. So I was fortunate enough to work with Marks and Spencer's during that year in industry. I did HR within stores there. I really enjoyed it. Decided to make some choice when I went back to university to specialise in human resources. I came out with a business and human resources degree. And then I was fortunate enough to get offered a place on the M&S graduate scheme after I graduated. I returned to M&S. I did about a year there on their graduate scheme. And while I really enjoyed the HR side of things, I was less keen on working Saturdays. And all my friends were working in professional services Monday to Friday. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to see if I can do what I'm enjoying doing, but do that in a professional environment. So I took the leap of faith and I went into the legal profession. And I spent over 10 years in the legal at various law firms. And then I had children in and around that. I left my last role in legal about 8 years ago due to caring for my children. About 9 months later, I got a phone call from one of the partners I'd worked with at that law firm saying, we've got a client who'd like some HR advice, ad hoc HR advice. It's not very much. I wonder what you're up to if you'd be interested. That client was Triple Point. So I went along and I met with Triple Point and I thought, yeah, this works nicely for me. I can make this work. My children are a little bit older and 10 hours a week wasn't very much. And 6 years later, I'm still here. It was just me. We're now a team of 8. And the 10 hours a week is now pretty much full time. But I'm really grateful that, through getting where I am today, I've also been able to have a role which has allowed me to work flexibly for the majority of the time when my family were young. And as my needs have changed and adapted, so have the needs of the business. So that's worked really well for me.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Victoria. Myself, I am actually from Canada, and I started out wanting to be a teacher. So my degree is actually a Bachelor of Arts in Canadian Studies, which is very useful. And I used to be a corporate trainer in my prior life. And then when my husband and I decided to move here, I went back to school at night while I was working and did accountancy and moved to KPMG, where I did my ACA, and then managed to do a secondment over to the London office. And when I left to work at Northern Trust, which is a custody bank here in Canary Wharf that's based out of Chicago. I'd never heard of a custody bank before. I thought all banks were the ones you put your bank machine in. So I had never really even understood that there was such thing as a financial services industry, let alone what a custody bank was. So I did that for a few years. And then I moved over to where I currently am at Mondrian Investment Partners. I've been there 13 years. And I started out as their internal audit manager. I did internal audit in Northern Trust as well. So I did that for a few years. It's quite a small business. So having kind of audited everything once, I was looking for something new. So I moved into the compliance and risk team, where I worked for several years, and I became the head of risk eventually there. And then in 2018, we needed someone to head up the finance team, and they asked me if I'd be interested. So sure, why not? Having never worked in a finance team, I've actually never personally done month end, but I do manage the team. And then a year after that, we were looking for a head of HR, and we couldn't find the right person externally. So they asked me if I would be interested in that as well. Having never worked in HR, I thought, sure, why not? And I took that on as well. So I think in my career, it's really been about taking opportunities that have come up, putting myself, I guess, in uncomfortable positions where I have a steep learning curve. I must like adrenaline. And yeah, so that's taken me to where I am today. So I now have 25 people reporting to me over the finance team, HR team. I also manage reception and our executive assistants. So it's really managing pretty much everything that's outside of investment, and the operations teams report into me. So I get to see everything. Excellent. So moving on to our questions. The first one that we have is, what is or are your favorite parts of your job? And it can be more than one. And what is the biggest challenge that you faced in your role? Why don't you start us off, Elizabeth?
So I think in terms of what my favorite part is, I think there's probably a few, but I think being in a risk function means that I have to know quite a lot about what's going on across all the different areas. So I have to almost have my finger in lots of different pies, but it means I get to talk to pretty much everybody that you can imagine, from a kind of really senior management perspective down to sort of everybody across the floor. So it might be sort of onboarding new graduates, it might be speaking to apprentices, through to kind of having quite senior sort of board meetings. So no 2 days are the same. Lots and lots of talking with people, which I quite enjoy, although sometimes it can be quite tiring. And I think it's just understanding how you can help people to make the business grow as part of my role. So I really enjoy that. In terms of what the biggest challenge is, time always. There's always more that you want to do, but never enough time to get it done. So it's working out where can you add the most value. You know, how can you get other people to kind of work together and collaborate so that you're not there. And I think sometimes people think I'm the big bad wolf, and I'm kind of there to stop things. And I'm there to kind of tell people off and point at things and tell them they're not right. But I think a lot of what I do with my stakeholders is trying to make sure that sort of people know to phone me, and it's not a blame sort of game. So that could be anything from something's gone wrong, we've lost some money. My questions are, right, okay, how can we make it better? What do we do to sort of make sure that doesn't happen again? So I think that's kind of my good bits and challenges, and sometimes they completely overlap, and one day it's, you know, the thing that you really don't like is the thing the next day that actually you really get your teeth into and love. So I think there's quite a lot of different challenges and sort of positives there.
Yeah, what do you think, how would you describe risk to someone from outside of the risk management framework?
So I guess it's every day we make decisions, and I think the risk is that something might happen that goes wrong, and it's almost how do you so I like to use analogies, but it's probably like the traffic lights. You know, do you decide to use the traffic lights to cross the road, or do you like to just jaywalk and sort of walk across in the middle of the road? And the risk is I'm going to walk out and I'm going to get hit by a car. Okay, and it's how do you stop that from happening? So you might use the traffic lights, but as I do with my children, if you actually look, you can't always trust the green man. And I kind of see that's like the control. So how do you make sure that you put sort of those controls in place so that you know when you cross the road, you're not going to do it on a motorway without the traffic lights, without the sort of crossing, but you might do it on a normal road. And I guess that's kind of our sort of risk appetite. So how comfortable are you with what the risks that you're taking? So that was quite a really long-winded answer to your question, but
no,
hopefully that
great.
describes it a bit more.
No, I think that's a great way to describe it. Thank you. And Victoria, what about you? What are your favorite parts and biggest challenges?
I think there's some similarities to what Elizabeth just said here, because I think part of our, you know, a similarity we all have between our roles as kind of a core function to the business is you work right across the business. You see the very broad picture of what's going on. So for me, it's undoubtedly the variety of my role. I can go from meeting to meeting, on any given day, and the content and subject matter of that meeting can be very different. I think in equal measure, this is also potentially the challenge, because you get pulled in different directions. It's quite hard for people to see visibility on, make it, kind of what you're working on, so it makes it hard to prioritize. You're never just working on one particular project or with one particular team at a time. But again, I think it's, at different times, like Elizabeth said, it's the challenge is also the bit that you enjoy as well. So the two go hand in hand very much for me.
Absolutely agree. That's great. And our next question, what keeps you motivated in your job? Maybe I'll start off with that one. I think for me, it's the endless challenges. I think, like we're saying, every day is different. You know, you can start your week thinking you're going to approve payroll and, you know, look at the financial statements, and then, you know, someone will walk into your room and ask you a question about their benefits that you have to do some research on, and that can throw your whole day. Or a line manager might need your help dealing with a difficult discussion they're having about performance management, or just having a difficult conversation with an employee, and that can kind of knock everything sideways. But I like the challenge of always doing different things and sort of having to juggle, and it keeps me busy, and I like to do many different things at the same time. That's for me what motivates me. And Elizabeth, what about you?
I think it sounds very similar. I think for me, I manage a team. I have a team of 8 people across sort of investment risk and enterprise risk. So that's everything from if a person goes in or calls up one of our advisors and wants to invest some money, whether it's sort of ISAs or other investments, are they getting what they've asked for? Or if they said, I don't like to take risk, and you're asking them to go into that, versus sort of operational risk, which might be sort of people, processes, systems. It's quite a broad remit. But I think for me, the motivation comes from my team a lot of the time, because they're the people that are there to kind of guide me most of the time, but for me to develop them, and they also help me sort of do some of those areas as well. And I think, you know, they're watching them grow into roles and building succession and those type of things are sort of really key, especially in risk, where it's a relatively newish function, and sort of building those skill sets from the ground up is really important. I think also I was sort of thinking about this question, and it's definitely my home life keeps me motivated at work as well. So I think there needs to be a balance between the two. I don't know that I could ever say it's balanced. I think there's always sort of complete overlap. And I've got children in the background you might be able to hear, but I've got 2 young children. So for me, it's sort of being able to balance the work and the home as much as I can, but being able to talk to them about, you know, how do they invest their pocket money, and how do they sort of put their money into savings club, and what does that look like? And I think that's part of what motivates me to sort of do my job as well.
Yeah, I think that's so very true. Actually, I on my team, in our finance team, people can also we sponsor ACAs. So I have graduates come in, and you kind of see them, they don't know, you know, anything about accounting, and then they leave your team and go on a rotation on another team, and they're fully qualified. So it's quite, I know exactly what you mean about how it's very gratifying to be able to help people that way. And we actually have a question here. What's the most interesting thing or task that you do in your role? Is there anything in particular that you enjoy doing, Elizabeth?
I think I quite like challenging people. I think that's part of my role in risk, is to kind of sit there and challenge, and the kind of noses in, fingers off. So I used to be in operations, and there was a lot that you do, and I'm sure Maria appreciates that there's just so much to get through. I think from a risk perspective, a lot of what I do is kind of finding the right question and finding the right way to ask that question so it doesn't come across confrontational. So I actually really like sitting in the committee meetings and sort of trying to work out, you know, where the risks actually are and what the right thing is to do. And I think that's probably one of my favorite things to do. Probably not for everyone's taste, but that's why I'm in risk.
No, that's excellent. And Maria, Victoria, do you have any specific tasks that you love doing?
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me, I think it's just problem solving, and I think that is one of the things that you get really good at in operations, because you tend to get thrown into, and I think you know, it could be probably said for a lot of different areas, but within the ops space, we often get things like, oh, you know, particular client wants to do this sort of trade that we've never done before, and there's a commercial time period in which we need to do it. Can you accommodate, and if so, how can you accommodate? Or we're going to launch a new asset class. Obviously, crypto's kind of been in the news for a little bit now, and just being a part of those conversations and literally just trying to figure out and problem solve on the go, I find quite interesting. It isn't a particular problem that I have to fix every day, which makes it interesting and motivates me, definitely. And I think it's how you learn, going into those uncomfortable places and having to think about things you probably, you know, when you wake up in the morning, never think you will have to think about that during the day. But yeah, I think problem solving for me is definitely the thing I enjoy most.
Yeah. And Victoria?
For me, it's the it's the one-on-one conversations or the small group conversations that guides people to an outcome, whether it's an employee or a line manager wanting to resolve a situation. And it might be you're looking at a policy, but actually you're thinking, okay, this is a policy, it's a guide, it's a guiding principle, in my opinion. How do you relate to this in these circumstances? And really thinking of the needs of the individual, and then reaching an outcome that's suitable for everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. It's almost that conflict resolution sometimes can be very gratifying when you have people that, have two different points of view, and you bringing them together and trying to find a collaborative response to something. I find that quite gratifying.
Yeah.
Okay, the next question. The question is, did you have any misconceptions about working in the finance industry, and how has this changed since? And I think from my perspective, it was definitely that all financial services was like a retail bank, or like your HSBCs, your NatWest. I actually, growing up, I was in a small town, 20,000 people in Canada, had no exposure to financial services other than your high street bank. So I thought, when it opened my eyes to this entire industry, I find my misconception is I didn't know it was diverse as it was. So there's so many things that the financial services industry does: insurance, asset management, you've got investment banks, you've got retail banks, and so many different types of careers in each of those. So for me, that was eye-opening. Definitely. And Victoria, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, similar to what you just said, Jamie, but I think when I came to, I told you how I came to meet Triple Point from my career in legal. When I actually went to have a meeting with Triple Point about, could I sort of help them what they wanted support with, I had no idea what an investment manager was. I tried to do the sort of research you do when you go for an interview, but it wasn't really an interview. It was a bit of a two-way process. They brought in someone who I was told was the head of sales, and I thought, this is financial services investment manager, what's the head of sales doing? So I had to sort of bottom that out in my mind and sort of bounce that around and work out what that was. I thought I would probably I didn't think I was necessarily going to like financial services, actually. I thought I could be walking into quite an outdated, sort of very process orientated type business. There was probably like to be full of accountants, I think, is the stereotype I had in my mind. But what I actually found was a real variety of people, and especially at Triple Point, it's people who are looking for investments with purpose, wanting to make the world a better place. I'm very passionate about the business that I'm working for today, and that's because I can explain to my 10-year-old daughter what we do and the difference we make. And I think actually being able to demystify what financial services is and the kind of specific sector you're working in is really meaningful to someone so young. I think I was used to, certainly when people said to me before me joining financial services, so I work in financial services, I probably sort of kind of glazed over and thought, okay, I won't understand. But one of the, today we have such a range of people working with us, from lawyers, to marketeers, to surveyors, to people who specialise in, energy, housing. The opportunities are endless, really, and it's far more than we think it is on the surface.
Absolutely. I think for me, it was trying to figure out also, how do we make money?
Yes.
Why do clients pay us? So, trying to understand the services we provide and how we charge our fees on different things. I found that really interesting, and I had no idea about that before I started. What kind of key piece of advice do you think you would offer, Victoria, if students wishing to pursue a career in investment management?
I think it's try and be open-minded, think about all the variety of roles that there are in investment management, and you haven't got to squeeze yourself into an investment type role if you're interested in the industry and what the work is doing, but perhaps investment's not for you. I think the other thing as well, which is a big misconception, is you don't necessarily need to be good at maths to be in investment management. There are plenty of roles within the sector where you're not sort of working on a calculator day in, day out. One of the areas that's very popular at the moment is sustainability. There's a huge amount of scope for that within investment management, and that's extremely interesting. And if you've got the opportunity to be in, whether it's placements or talking to people or attending these gain seminars and webinars, really be very open-minded about the type of roles that you can pursue in investment management, and don't think you've got to commit early doors to necessarily an investment role.
I completely agree. I think also, when opportunities come up, just to grab them
Yeah.
and see where it takes you, because you never know when something's going to come up that might interest you. And even if you don't necessarily know 100% about that topic, it's, you can certainly learn about it. And I think talking also to others, talking to people, your peer groups.
I was just going to say, asking questions as well. No one actually ever minds talking about what they do, because
so true.
So sort of don't sit there, and if you have these opportunities, think, oh gosh, what's that acronym they just used, or I wonder what that really stands for. Ask, and actually, that's when you start to peel back the layers of an onion type analogy, and you kind of really find what's at the core of it.
Absolutely. So. Maria or Elizabeth, did you have anything to add? Any advice?
I mean, a lot of what you guys said, around there's diversity of roles. I will say as well, again, similar to what you were just saying, just take the opportunity, get your foot in the door. It might not be the role that you end up with, or it might not be the role that you absolutely love. But I think, especially when you're starting out, like I didn't really, I started out in FX operations. And I kind of understood, foreign exchange, again, coming from another country, everybody goes back to the dollar. Like, you kind of understand that just from traveling. But again, like from a bank standpoint, I wasn't quite sure what it all meant, and, who all is buying foreign exchange and for what reason. And yes, like would you have asked me, I don't know, when I was graduating college, that's what I would have, that was the role that I was going to go into? Absolutely not. And would I have known or said that my career would have been in operations and, almost 20 years later still here? Probably not. But it was literally the door that opened for me at that point. And then it kind of went from there. So I definitely think try it. You don't, it doesn't have to be the role that you do for 500 years. It's just an opening that you can then learn about the company and then see what other roles are available. And if it doesn't suit you, within, with time, you will find the right place and land in the right role, I think.
That's great advice.
I was going to say, from my perspective, I think it's almost, once you get that foot in the door, it's how can you add value to your firm, not just with the day job that you're doing, but sort of outside of that. One of the things that I've got involved in, and probably one of the reasons why I'm sat here talking today, is because I'm really sort of passionate about diversity and inclusion, whether that be gender balance, social mobility, LGBT, any kind of underrepresented group. And I think that to me has meant that I've had visibility to people that I wouldn't have ordinarily. I've had to do strategy, I've had to plan events. There's all these things that probably at that time in my career I wouldn't have been exposed to. So I think it's probably take that opportunity, and don't think that just because it's not the right role right now for you, that doesn't mean you can't get sort of other skills and network around that through whatever your passion is. If it's sustainability, if it's diversity and inclusion, it might be, there's so many different ways, CSR, charity at work. How can you get involved and sort of improve your brand almost through what you're doing? So definitely recommend that.
That's great. And on the topic of skills, what do you think are some of the skills that it takes to do your job, Elizabeth?
So I was thinking about this, and I was wondering, sort of trying to work out what skills there are. But I think it's probably, for me, it's a mixture of what I like to call behavioural sort of aptitude. So not, some people call them people skills, or soft skills. Actually, I don't mind people skills. I think they're better and bigger than soft skills. It's kind of, how do you influence people? How do you impact people? There's quite a lot in my role around innovation, and I think quite a lot of kind of what I'm expected to do is to kind of maybe show some outward confidence, but do that through some of the skills. I think coming in from a junior perspective into risk, it will be around risk management, but you're not expected to turn up day one and understand really what that means, right? You just need to be willing and able to learn, and all of those technical skills can follow. So I think, especially from my perspective, being an asset manager and looking at risk, yes, investment risk is a bit technical, but that can be learned through qualifications. I'm not working in quant, so I'm not looking at models or algorithms. That's not the route that I've gone down. Back to your point, Victoria, I'm not a maths person. I left maths at GCSE and I was very happy to leave it way far behind. That doesn't mean I don't know how to use an Excel spreadsheet to do some calculations, but that's a skill that's learned. So I think it's a mixture of technical risk management and also some behavioural pieces. And I think for me, it's really about, how do you engage with people? So how do you kind of make people feel like you're kind of helping them along the journey, and not kind of being the person who's in the way all the time. So from a risk perspective, those are kind of the push and pull, I guess, a little bit.
Right. You're not always slamming on the brakes, sometimes just tapping them gently.
Just a little
right?
bit, just tap them a little bit.
Excellent, great, thank you. And Maria, what about the skills for your role?
I agree with Elizabeth. I think anybody who really wants to kind of be in operations can be in operations. When I started, my manager was a marine biologist. My first mentor, still my mentor, was a PhD in astrophysics. There were lots of people kind of that started in my cohort that, were French, majors and that kind of thing. So it was very, very varied. You did have, some of the finance kind of business administration folk like myself sprinkled in as well, but it was genuinely just a complete breadth of just all sorts of different things. And I do think that it is just that wanting to learn and wanting to really understand what the particular function or job is about. I know I've talked a little bit about problem solving, so definitely an interest in just being thrown into issues and just trying to find a kind of an answer. You normally will have never seen the problem, and a lot of people may have not seen the problem as well. So it isn't like you can go and ask a manager or someone. You're literally all just trying to figure it out, which again is an interesting part. If you're, if you enjoy that sort of thing, then it's the sort of role that you would like. The other, I think that Elizabeth has touched on, and that is also similar in operations, is kind of the whole innovation side. So one big part of operations is efficiency, and how can we become more efficient, and that oftentimes is hand in hand with innovation, whether that is looking at different systems or new technologies like say blockchain or common domain models and that sort of thing, or it may just be the way that you work, right? So I don't know, why are we getting the same 5 emails? Why is everybody getting the same 5 emails and responding? Can one person get the email and respond on behalf of everyone? Things like that. But efficiency and innovation is definitely a big thing, and I think curiosity as well. To be able to understand and problem solve effectively, you really need to understand kind of the cause and effect of things. So you need to be curious and really understand, I don't know, why is this client trying to trade this particular thing? Or why is a trader trying to trade this particular thing? Or why did it get stuck in the system in a particular way where, we've seen hundreds of trades come down that haven't got stuck? Why did this one get stuck? And so you kind of really need to have the curiosity and almost drive to really get into the bottom of the problem and kind of work your way out and propose solutions. I think all of the capital markets knowledge and product knowledge and all of that, I think all of that can be taught and learned on the job. So I think it's really, if you are interested and you want to do it, I think anyone can do it.
Great. I think too, one of the things that I'm picking up from everybody is all of our roles are very collaborative. So none of us are sort of sitting in an office by ourselves all day, staring at a spreadsheet or, working in isolation. We all work across the business with the investment professionals, with senior management, with our graduates, across all the different business areas. So I think that's one of the great things about being in operations and being in risk and HR and finance is that you are exposed to the whole cycle. So you do get visual, you get touches with all of the different areas, which I find really interesting because I can talk to kind of every piece of the business, which sometimes when you are working in one department doing, a specific task, you don't necessarily get that kind of cross section, which I find really interesting as well. So, and you touched on mentors, Maria. Do you have any particular mentors that you wanted to share with the group?
Yeah, I think my experience with mentors, I've been quite lucky. I think I've only had one mentor where we just really haven't clicked and it kind of fizzled out. But from quite a young, I guess, point in my career, I actually sought out mentors. I know there's, a lot of companies will do matching programs, or even organizations like Gain, for example, will have mentor programs. And I definitely encourage people to do that. And I do mentor through some of these different organizations as well. But for me, it was more about who I clicked and who I felt like I could learn something from, which is how I ended up kind of reaching out to this gentleman that I was talking about, who's the astrophysicist. And I was really interested in kind of just the technicalities of products, and he really understood them really well. So we ended up kind of connecting that way, and then kind of stayed in touch over time. but I will say, I think the person probably that inspired me the most, and I know I've talked about him a little bit before, but you guys will see he's quite central to my work life, is my grandfather. And I think the reason why he inspires me is he was one of 12 children, quite poor. He left secondary school before graduating to help his family, and he literally started in the mailroom of a company that he ended up owning and being the CEO of. So it's just such a fantastic story of just, just him growing, self growth, self kind of motivation, literally rising through the ranks and just learning everything that he could. Obviously spent a lot of his time kind of outside of his work hours, just like picking things up and just learning as much as he could, and ended up owning the company. And so I think just, great, just self-advancement, just trying to do everything that you can. And I think you can, he is kind of one of those people that shows you that you can do, whatever you put your mind to. But the other side that I quite like about him, and I think that's where the whole DEI piece comes in for me, is he always gave back. He never forgot where he came from. And so as he became a bit wealthier, he was always like, going and buying like tons of Christmas toys for the poor children in Bolivia, and he would go and like give them to the schools. And he opened up a school in one of the cities, and things like that. He was always very much about where he started and never forgot kind of his roots and that kind of thing, and really instilled it in all of us, and how just we need to make the world a better place, however that is, whatever your contribution is. And so those two things for me, like, he is the person that I always, think of and am inspired by the most.
Oh, that's wonderful. It's funny, actually, our head of trading started in the mailroom. So he
Yeah.
started his career at the age of, I think it was 18, in the mailroom, and then he moved to compliance and risk, actually. And he's now head of our trading desk. So it really goes to show you, you can move all over the place. You don't know where you're going to end up, do you?
Exactly. I think it's just the grit and the, just wanting to do it and getting
Yeah.
there. It's amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think too, like, one of the reasons why it's so important that we get some more diversity at more senior levels is to provide mentors internally for, other women and other, diverse backgrounds, because a lot of us kind of look up and we see a lot of men sitting in those seats. So the diversity there is really important, I think. Yeah.
Agreed.
Elizabeth, did you have any thoughts on mentors and who your mentor was?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an amazing story, Maria. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure there's much more that you can share, and that would be great to hear it another time. From my perspective, I didn't really know what a mentor was when I had one. So looking back, I can see that this individual woman who she's now sort of a very senior role in a FTSE 100 company, but at the time she was just a managing director in the company I was at. And I actually got introduced to her through some speed networking at the firm that was run by the Women's Initiative Network. So I thought I'll go along to that. Didn't really know what that was supposed to be. Had an opportunity to kind of talk to very senior leaders. She was a woman, which was not very unusual, but she was a woman in risk. I thought maybe that's a place I want to get into. And so I was in operations, and I just said to her, look, I'd like to have a coffee. And it really was, I think she had a tea. I didn't really drink coffee because I was younger then, and I didn't need my coffee to make me work. But I remember talking to her, and she was just very receptive. She'd obviously worked very, very hard. I think the grit piece, Maria, that you mentioned, she really wanted to strive to do better. And I didn't think much of it. But then after that, we ended up talking occasionally. It wasn't very structured. I think one of the things I wanted to say was a mentor doesn't need to be somebody that you meet every month for 12 months. Right? Those are great. And I know that Gainrolls does those. And I think those have their purpose. But I think sometimes informal mentoring can work really, really well, especially with people that you click with. But I guess just to finish that story, so I noticed a role within her wider team. So obviously I had to go through the process to apply, but I ended up working for her a couple of years later as a kind of direct report. And I'd say then she became my sponsor. So she was the person sort of advocating for me when I wasn't in the room. So she went from, this is what you need to get into risk, to, there's a job in my team, please apply through this process over here. So I'm not involved, not conflicted. And then ended up working for her a couple of years later, and got a couple of promotions. And I think she was just someone who really supported me through that. But yeah, I mean, I think just having a coffee chat with someone, if you know why you want to speak to somebody, don't just kind of go for a scattergun approach. But if you can reach out to somebody and say, look, I'd really like to talk to you about this particular thing. People who usually give you their time. And even if it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, it doesn't need to be an ongoing relationship. unless you really click. So I think that for me is one of the mentors. I think I probably, in various different guises, whether informal or it's people you meet when you need to, I think that's really important to have that network of people, especially as a woman. You know, there aren't a huge amount of senior women. I think it's getting better. That's great. And then I think it's an opportunity to kind of pay it forward as well, to make sure that when you get into role, you don't need to be someone who's got 20 years of experience to be a mentor. You could have 6 months experience, a year's experience. Actually, you could mentor someone who's in a school. There's quite a few charities who do that as well. So I think mentoring is such a big topic. I think we could probably run a whole session on mentoring itself, but I think just don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask for that first conversation, because I think people will have it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think people are flattered when they get asked. And I think, you know, you can be sometimes intimidated if it's someone quite senior, but I've always found people like to talk about what they do. And if someone shows interest, they're more than happy to take the time to explain it. So yeah, I would also encourage that. That's great. Okay, we actually have a couple questions in our question and answer box. So I'll throw this out to the group. The first one, what are the toughest interview questions you've been asked and how did you tackle them? Anyone want to tackle that question?
I got asked, and I can't actually remember the question, which probably says a lot. It was one of these where, you know, you're in a building and the building has all windows. How many windows does it have? And they give you some parameters. Clearly, you know, again, even though I did do business administration, my maths, you know, isn't fantastic. But I think that was the hardest one, just because I had no idea how to even start thinking about the problem. Yeah, I don't know if that's
I had a
helpful or not.
similar one. Yeah, I got asked how many people in London drink tea.
Everyone.
Exactly, but it was quite interesting because I guess for those types of questions, there's no right answer. It's just a matter of being able to explain your thought process, I think, to talk them through, you know, I mean, 1 million people live in London, let's say 60% drink tea, what's the math on that? And I think they just want to hear, well, that's what I assumed they wanted to hear. They kind of wanted to see how you approached the question as opposed to there being some sort of right answer.
Yeah.
Anyone else have anything to share?
I was going to say one of the trickiest ones that I had, and I kind of reflected on it, was, are you a kind of big picture person or a kind of detailed person? And I think I answered it in a kind of, I'm a bit of both, and I quite like big picture, and I can be quite detailed, which I think is the honest answer. But it was like, if you had to choose, which one would it be? And I think sometimes as you go through the interview process, you're almost second guessing what you think the person wants to hear, rather than actually answering it sort of truthfully. So I had to just go with a kind of system one thinking and just go big picture. And I think they liked the answer, but I couldn't tell you why. So I think probably just go with your instincts, I think, on some of these questions, because I think, sometimes they're just a bit off the wall and a bit odd, but they're just trying to get your reaction.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're right, though. It's again, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. When I'm interviewing people, you almost kind of want to get to know you. Like, how will you fit in the team? Like, you don't want a team that everyone's detail oriented. You want to kind of have a nice mix. So one of the questions our general counsel asks when he's interviewing legal people is, you've got a box of Lego and you dump it on the floor. Are you the type of person that goes mad and kind of comes up with crazy, ideas, or do you follow the instructions and build exactly what's on the front of the box? That's all. He's just going after what kind of person are you and will you fit with the team? Will it be a good mix? So yeah, those are kind of the tough ones.
Quite often it's not the answer in itself in those sorts of questions, though, is it? It's how you approach it.
Yeah.
The strangest interview question I've had was, how many houses does Father Christmas visit inside the M25?
That's a good one.
I mean, it depends if Father Christmas is real as to where you're going.
Or if the children have been good, I guess.
Yeah, or if the children have been good, or let's and again, it's just a logic one, but it took me by surprise. But I haven't quite been mean enough to recycle it, though.
Yeah, I find the biggest place that people fall down on these questions is not being prepared and don't know enough about the company.
Yeah.
So whenever we ask, tell us what you know about Mondrian, that's kind of one of our first questions, and you can really nail that one by doing a lot of research. And we can always tell when someone's looked at our website.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's really obvious when someone has, but then the people that don't, they almost get discounted right away. So I think that's just easy prep. that you can do in advance. And the other one that I always like, have an outside interest. When you ask people what they're interested in, they're like, spreadsheets. Or, we had someone that loved to go to FCA conferences on the weekends. And I'm like,
really? I quite often ask them tell me something I wouldn't necessarily know about from reading your CV. And that's the kind of getting to know you question. That's sort of, you've told me everything, you've put everything on your CV that you want to show me and should impress me for the role. But let's, like, what do you really like? What do you really like to do? What's there?
Exactly. I think too, with all these roles, like we've said, you can learn on the job. So, it's not the technical side that we're necessarily interested in. You've probably graduated from university or some sort of program, or, have an interest in it. You're probably capable of doing the role. What we're really interested in is, how prepared were you? And, do you fit with the team? Is it a good cultural fit? And are you an interesting person? I think that's what I would say as well.
Jamie, sorry, there was another question, I think. What was the most challenging
task? I was just going to get to that one. Yeah. Do you want to start with that one, Maria? What's the most challenging task you have?
Well, so I actually do have two answers. I think from a professional standpoint, for those of you or those of us rather, because I think people on the call maybe haven't, but for those of us who went through Lehman, I think that definitely was the hardest task. At least it was for me, again, because no one really ever expected for something like that to happen. And I really don't think that the industry was ready for such a huge player to come down the way that it did. And so, I think now I remember, the days fondly. I think obviously in the moment it was not a fun period, but you just learned so much on the fly. We got exposed to so many things that we wouldn't have gotten exposed to otherwise, because everybody was just getting information kind of real time. And so rather than having, the usual cascade where they'll tell management and then they tell them, and on and on and on, it was like everybody into a room, right? We're going to get told what needs to happen and then we're going to go and do it. So I do think it was, the longest hours I've ever worked, the most stress I've ever been in. And it was constant, like fire, but was also probably one of the most rewarding periods, I think, looking back on it. But I do think on a kind of more balanced level, I think the period where my kids were between 0 and 5 years and trying to have a full-time job, because both my husband and I both have full-time careers, we've never really stopped. I think that was the toughest, just trying to balance work and life. And when they're little, I feel like they're constantly sick. You're always juggling. One of you is always having to be home, and this is going back to the days where working from home, was it really a thing or not that normal of a thing? And I think that just that the mental drain that you're constantly in, trying to juggle everything that comes with having very young children and the demanding kind of work environment for the two of us, I think that was the absolute toughest. I'm not saying that now that they're not 5 it's easy, but it's a little bit easier.
Different challenges.
It is different challenges, but honestly, like, just them not being sick is already, like, especially in this time of the year, honestly, is like just so much better. But yes, I think looking at it on balance, even with Lehman, I would say that having kids 0 to 5 and a career was probably harder, and obviously longer.
I have to say, I personally don't have children. So during COVID, when watching my colleagues struggle with working from home while trying to teach their children, it's like, I think we all probably want to block that from our memories, but I understand and empathize with you all.
I ended up taking a career break right around then, because I was already thinking about it, and then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take the break now because something's got to give, and I'm quite happy to step away for a little bit. And I took a year off to homeschool the kids. But yeah, honestly, it was just too much.
Victoria, what about you? Any challenges, challenging tasks that you have to perform?
I think I'd say that it's less of a challenge day to day. It's more kind of, Triple Point has grown very quickly. So we've gone from we're 5 times bigger than we were when I first joined, which has, brought lots of challenges around kind of governance and structure and processes and teams like that. And it's bringing people on that journey and helping people understand, kind of on that sort of process, various stages of change, and why it's necessary. And we've retained people who are still here 6 years ago, and stuck in their ways of doing things, and it's those sorts of challenges, and it's one step can sometimes be one step forward, 2 steps back, and you can do it with one team and they're there, and then you've got to reset with another team.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Elizabeth?
I think it's aligned to that, Victoria, because we're a fast-growing firm as well at Close Brothers Asset Management, and I think some of it, from a risk perspective, is where do we invest our money? Is it that we want to do operational excellence programs to improve some efficiencies, or actually do we need to invest in technology? And I think it's those trade-offs between what you do now versus what you're trying to look at in your kind of 3 to 5 year strategy. And I think that can be quite challenging because it brings everybody in, and it also can mean some things for people, and for processes, and ultimately sort of technology. So I think that's probably the most kind of broadly challenging thing. I think some of the challenges, probably as you say, Maria, is my husband and I both work full time, and we're both in quite stressful jobs. So I think it's how do you make sure, well, I don't think I ever do it convincingly, but you leave your work at work, and you try to sort of have the time with your friends and family as sort of value time. And I think sometimes that's difficult because when you're in a senior role, you're culpable whether you're kind of on your emails or not. You're kind of responsible for what's going on. So I think it's probably the challenge for me is to switch off, and I think got better at that probably through the pandemic, actually, because it means when I'm at work, with days I work in the office, I don't log back in. It's probably harder when you're at home, and it's quite tempting. The laptop's there. Oh, I've got some work to do. Probably can wait till tomorrow. So I think there's some boundaries there that sometimes they don't really work in terms of work versus home.
I totally agree. I had the same thing. When everyone's working from home, I kind of felt like I was supposed to be on all the time. So I actually quite enjoy commuting into the office and then I'm done, which is quite nice. I think for me, the most challenging thing is those difficult conversations. So being the head of HR, I get to deal with all of the awkward conversations in the business. We moved to business casual in the office, and people's definitions of that vary quite significantly. So if someone is inappropriately dressed, the manager comes to me, or people come to me and say, can you do something about that? Those kinds of awkward conversations. Sometimes you might have a challenging person that's having performance issues and you need to support the line manager and talking through those things. So I think a lot of people, when they think of HR, they think of the fun side, the D&I, the diversity and inclusion, the training, the benefits, the payroll, those kinds of fun things. But actually, I think most of my role is taken up dealing with people issues and having those difficult conversations and being sensitive to the person, but then still you have to protect the business as well. So having those challenging conversations is probably the most challenging thing in my role. Okay, well, that I think takes us to the end of all of our questions. So thank you everybody for participating. Really appreciate it. And I'll hand it back to Vicky.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here, and a huge, huge thank you to Victoria and Jamie and Elizabeth and Maria for a really insightful, interesting, quite entertaining, really honest conversation. I think that's what we all needed to hear. I hope you all, after these 2 series of events, realised that the investment management industry is quite a diverse one in terms of what's available career-wise, and I probably would say there's probably something for every single one of you, whether or not you want to be an investor or not. There's probably something that would suit your skills and your interests perfectly, and I hope we've managed to bring some of those to life for you. Please stay in touch with us. We've got more events coming up. Next week, we've got the difference between investment management and investment consultancies. And you can stay in touch with us on Instagram. We are Girls Are Investors, and on Twitter. We're no longer on Facebook at the moment, but on Twitter, just Are Investors. Once again, a huge thank you to our speakers. Please come back. We'd love to have you all back if something comes up that you'd like to speak on. And I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you, Vicky.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.